Today we're providing a 2021 overview of the code series for use and occupancy of structures in the United States. This is offered to building inspectors, building code departments, permit staff, plan reviewers, and contractors. We offer this free of charge. We ask that you can please like and support this work, subscribe to this channel. Also view our other offerings that we have. And let's work together. If you'd like to discuss having in-person presentations of this work, we can do that. Or if you have any comments or suggestions or any questions, just email those to me. My email address is provided on this page. We appreciate you, and let's get started on the 2021 Code Series Use and Occupancy Classifications. For this program, we will be using the 2021 code series. You can get those through ICC at their website. We also have a link in the description where you can purchase those books. So you're going to need the 2021 IBC and the IRC to reference. But we're going to try to follow closely. If you don't have a code book, you can still do the program. Just make a few notes, and then you can follow up with your code books later. So a quick review on a couple of things. The purpose of the codes is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare by regulating construction. Proper implementation of the codes helps to reduce potential hazards, lower construction cost overall, provides it's a standard in construction, and it contributes to the community well-being. So we need to be in the right code book, right? So it's going to be the residential code or the building code. We're going to kind of touch on the differences and which code book you should be in. So we'll look in the IBC in the very beginning, in section 101.2, the scope. It says the provisions of this code shall apply to the construction, alteration, relocation, enlargement, replacement, repair, equipment, use and occupancy, location, maintenance, removal, and demolition of every building or structure of any apparatus connected or attached to such buildings or structures. Here's the key exception. The exception is detached 1- and 2-family dwellings and multiple single-family dwellings, townhouses, not more than 3 stories above grade plane in height with a separate means of egress, and their accessory structures shall comply with the IRC. So we're looking at 1- and 2-family dwellings and most townhouses, and in that kind of case, we're going to be going to the IRC. Everything else is going to be in the IBC. So again, for single-family homes, townhomes, most of the townhomes, with the exceptions that we have in the code, we're going to be going to the International Residential Code. And we look in the scope of the International Residential Code. It's going to read that it shall apply to the construction, alteration, and so forth of detached 1- or 2-family dwellings and townhouses. This little graphic has a good depiction of exactly what we're talking about. A townhouse is defined in the International Residential Code as a single-family dwelling unit constructed in a group of 3 or more attached units, in which each unit extends from foundation to roof with a yard or public way not less than on 2 sides. Now, this program is going to be based primarily on the IBC, okay? So we're going to be looking at the structures subject to the IBC. Building planning requirements consist of classifying the building according to occupancy group. So we're going to be looking at that, verifying the type of construction. We won't be calculating height and area. We'll just kind of do a general overview of that. But primarily we're looking at occupancy group and type of construction. So we'll go to the IBC Chapter 3, Use and Occupancy Classifications. This is the first thing we got to determine, our use and occupancy of the structure. Some major factors in determining the use and occupancy is going to be the amount of combustible materials, high flammability, explosive, or health hazard contents, the occupant load density, how familiar someone is with the building, the mobility of the occupants, and the alertness of the occupants. All these are critical factors to be considered in occupancy classification. Each classification as listed in the IBC will also have sub-classifications in some cases. So we're going to take a little bit of time and go through each one of these one at a time. So let's begin at Group A, assemblies. Places where people gather for entertainment, worship, dining, or recreation. So we're thinking about theaters, restaurants, stadiums, libraries, churches. They're divided into groups A1 through A5. We're going to go through these kind of quick, but we can always review again. So A1 is your performing arts and motion picture type applications. When we consider A2, commonly we're looking at food and drink consumption. So these are restaurants, cafeterias, food courts, nightclubs, bars, taverns, banquet halls, casino gaming areas. When we talk about A3, we're talking about worship, recreation, and amusement, and it's a broad category, and it's for gatherings. So these are places of worship, churches, temples, mosques, libraries, museums, art galleries, community halls, gymnasiums, lecture halls, funeral parlors. There's quite an assortment that fit into this A3 category. A4 is indoor sporting events. And A5 is outdoor sporting events. Type B is your business occupancy. These are spaces for professional services, transactions, and minor assembly with fewer than 50 occupants. The 50 occupant is a key number to remember. So we're talking about banks, offices, barbershops, higher education classrooms are type B. Type E is educational. These are facilities for educational purposes through the 12th grade with 6 or more students. The one thing to keep in mind here is it will include daycare centers, but it does not include universities. Type F would be factory and industrial uses, buildings used for assembly, fabricating, manufacturing, or processing goods. It's divided into 2 categories. F1 is moderate hazard and F2 is a low hazard. So let's first discuss the F1. That's the higher hazard. It's or moderate. These are facilities for manufacturing, assembly, or processing of materials that are combustible but are not classified as low hazard F2 or high hazard H. H is a separate category. We're going to cover that in just a minute. Common types and examples of F1 occupancies would include automotive and aircraft, wood and paper, textile and apparel, food and beverage, different kind of bakeries, manufacturing operations, construction manufacturing operations. You got to think about the hazard that's being used and what the fire hazards are that are being considered for each type of these occupancies. F2 is described in the IBC would be your low hazards. This is going to be a place that manufactures something that's not quite as combustible. Think about china, tile, concrete products, different things like that. So now let's discuss these high hazard type H occupancies. They're divided into groups from H1 through H5. And these are structures that handle or store materials that pose a physical or health hazard, toxic, combustible, chemicals, fireworks stands, explosive materials. Group H1 occupancies are facilities that deal with materials that pose a detonation hazard. H2 occupancies are buildings or spaces that house hazardous materials which pose a deflagration hazard or a hazard for accelerated burning. Because H2 occupancies present high fire and explosive risk, materials within the groups are categorized by how they behave in an emergency. The key types of H2 materials and the facilities that house them would include facilities utilizing or storing Category 1A and 1B flammable gases, Class 1 organic peroxides, Class 3 oxidizers, large-scale battery storage operations, and more. H3 occupancies are facilities that store, process, or use materials that readily support combustion or pose a physical hazard rather than a severe explosion or health hazard. H4 occupancies are buildings or spaces that house materials that pose significant health hazards. The classification is generally divided by the specific type of health hazard material involved. H5 is a specific high hazard building occupancy classification in the IBC. It does not have multiple subtypes. Instead, it universally applies to semiconductor fabrication facilities and comparable research and development areas that use hazardous production materials in excess of allowable limits. These facilities are highly specialized due to the strict safety requirements needed to handle flammable, toxic, and corrosive substances. Our next occupancy type is institutional. They're divided into I1 through I4s. Institutional 1, I1 occupancies are facilities housing more than 16 people, excluding the staff, who reside on a 24-hour basis and receive custodial care in a supervised environment. They are divided into two main condition types depending on the resident's ability to evacuate safely in an emergency. Per the IBC, Group I1 includes facilities such as assisted living, group homes, halfway houses, and rehabilitation centers. Group I1 Condition 1, residents can evacuate without assistance. Condition 2, the residents require limited verbal or physical assistance to evacuate. Again, the key is proper evacuation and self-preservation. So let's talk about I2. Under the IBC, I2 occupancies include buildings used for medical, surgical, psychiatric, nursing, or custodial care on a 24-hour basis for more than 5 persons who are incapable of self-preservation. The self-preservation is the key in determining these different categories. And there are 2 specific conditions based on the type and level of care. When we talk about I2s, we're talking about different conditions, right? So condition 1 focuses on nursing, medical care without typical emergency surgery and patient stabilization services. Occupants require care but are not restrained. A good example would be a nursing home, an assisted living facility, a foster care, or a detox facility. A condition 2 would be higher degrees of not having self-preservation. This would be like a 24-hour facility such as a general hospital or a surgical center. I3 occupancies are detention and correctional type facilities. And I3 occupancies have specific conditional uses that also have to be factored in. Conditions 1 through 5 are listed. Within the IBC, you have Group I4 occupancies that include facilities that provide custodial care for more than 5 persons of any age for fewer than 24 hours per day. The 2 primary types of I4 occupancies are adult daycare facilities, and number 2 is child daycare facilities. Again, it's based on the type of occupancy, the amount of time, and the number of people that are involved. Type M occupancies are very general in nature. These are your stores and spaces used for display and sale of merchandise. And type R is residential. Now this can be confusing because we're not going to the RC unless we're specifically into an R3. So when we talk about residential, we're talking about spaces providing sleeping accommodation, excluding institutional facilities. And the subgroups are listed in 4 different categories. R1 is a transient, that's like a hotel. R2 is going to be your multifamily and your apartment buildings. R3 is going to be your 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses. And R4 is going to be your assisted living and care facilities with 6 to 16 residents. R1 typically is thought of as hotels, but it can include other things. R1 occupancies are residential buildings containing sleeping units where occupants are primarily transient. In other words, they're staying less than 30 days. Because these guests are unfamiliar with the building layout, R1 spaces require stricter fire protection and egress features than permanent residents such as your R3s. Under the IBC, Group R2 occupancies include buildings with sleeping units or more than two dwelling units where occupants are primarily permanent in nature. Think about apartment buildings. This primarily encompasses multifamily housing, long-term dormitories, and non-transient congregate living facilities where residents typically stay longer than 30 days. R3 is typically your residential occupancy, such as one or two family dwellings, uh, congregate residence, care facilities, certain items like this. You have to look at these very closely because these can be confusing. It's also well to look at these very closely if you're going to be taking the ICC exam because there are some rather uh, tricky, I wouldn't say tricky, but well, yes, I would, tricky questions on the ICC exam. R4 occupancies under the IBC include supervised residential care and assisted living facilities for more than 5 but not more than 16 people, and this excludes staff. They are subdivided into two conditions based on the resident's ability to safely evacuate during an emergency. These conditions need to be looked at very closely, and they have primarily to do with how a person can maintain self-preservation, evacuation. So in R4, the condition 1, or evacuation capability, all residents are physically and mentally capable of responding to an emergency situation and completing a building evacuation without assistance. And R2 includes residents who require limited verbal or physical assistance to respond to an emergency. So it all has to do with response and proper evacuation. To expand on R4's types of facilities that would be included, this is going to be your assisted living facilities, group homes, residential board and care facilities, alcohol and drug rehabilitation centers, halfway houses, social rehabilitation facilities, and congregate care areas. R5 occupancies are predominantly found in the IRC and adopted by certain regional building codes. They encompass detached one or two family dwellings and single-family townhouses that are typically limited to 3 stories and separate individual means of egress. There are 5 subcategories in the R5 classification. So our next category is Type S, storage, buildings used for storing goods, merchandise, or vehicles. They're divided into 2 classifications, S1 for moderate and S2 for low hazards. Group S1 occupancies are structures used for moderate hazard storage facilities, storing flammable or combustible materials that burn with a moderate rapidity, but are not classified as hazardous in the H categories. While Group S2 occupancies under the IBC define buildings used for the storage of non-combustible and low-hazard materials that do not present significant fire hazards. These facilities generally house items that do not burn easily or are packaged in low combustible material packaging. Some common examples of S2 would be your parking garages, certain beverage storage, depending on alcohol content levels. Remember the 16% content level if you're taking that exam. Food and agricultural products, metal and hardware, and general materials such as glass, gypsum, ice, ceramic products. I believe on the ICC exam they also ask about a ceramic products type of occupancy. So our next category is going to be type U. This is kind of where you put everything that won't fit anywhere else. It's utility and miscellaneous, accessory or incidental structures. So this is going to be your private garages, sheds. A retaining wall would be a type U occupancy. Other good examples would be agricultural buildings such as a barn, a fence. Again, we talk about water towers, cooling towers. I would be thinking about cell towers would also may very well be under this type U miscellaneous occupancy. So after we determine what our occupancy type is going to be, our next thing is determine what type of construction we're going to be having to propose here. So when a set of plans comes in, these are kind of the things that you're going to look at first. Construction type is based on how the building is constructed. The requirements are found in Chapter 6 of the IBC. Most people will relate the construction type to the materials used for constructing a building, but it is a little more than that to it. The little more is called combustibility and fire resistance. The code classifies a building's type of construction in three ways: non-combustible, which is type 1 and 2, non-combustible, combustible, type 3 and 4, and combustible, type 5. Type 1 is fire resistive, type 2 is non-combustible, type 3 is ordinary construction, type 4 is heavy timber, type 5 is wood frame construction. In the building code, types 1, 2, 3, and 5 are divided into subcategories A and B. Type A is protected. Structural elements are coated or covered in materials that provide a higher enhanced hourly fire resistant rating. Type B is unprotected. Structural elements have basic or low fire resistance ratings. Type B buildings are generally cheaper to build, but have stricter limits on height and total square footage. The determining factor is it combustible? Type 5 examples is a one-story building designed with glue laminated beams, wood floor joists, wood roof deck, 2x4 wood exterior construction. The building would be classified as a 5B. If the walls, roof, columns, and beams are 1 hour rated, the type of construction would be 5A. Type 4 is a one-story heavy timber buildings of 8x8 solid wood columns. Type 3 example, a one-story building is designed with 8-inch concrete masonry block, wood roof trusses, interior bearing wood frame partitions. It all has to go with the combustibility of the building, and that's what the determining factor is going to be. Non-combustible is determined as either type 1 or type 2. Non-combustible type 1, a good example would be a 20-story building built of steel frame and concrete elevator and stair core. The steel columns are 3-hour rated. This building would likely be also sprinklered. Type 2 example would be a steel building designed with steel beams, purlins, non-combustible insulation, siding, roof panels, and steel interior framing. That would be type 2B. When classifying the building, it's important to understand that the building must meet all the fire rating requirements for each building element as listed in Table 601. Table 601 is going to be a critical table to get familiar with. One item of note I really want you to pay special attention to is the last bullet point we have here. It says, note that firewalls are required to be structurally independent from the structural elements on both sides and have specific rules for termination above the roof and past exterior walls. And in this case, for these firewalls, you're going to be looking at IBC 706. Again, highlight, mark, put a tab there at Table 601 in your IBC. Table 601, we're going to keep looking at it. It's important to understand the terminology and its application to building components. The primary structural frame has a distinct meaning in the IBC. The primary structural frame shall include all of the following structural elements. You can't leave any of these out. Number 1 is the columns. Number 2 is the structural members having direct connection to the columns, including the girders, the beams, the trusses, and spandrels. Number 3 is members of floor construction and roof construction having direct connection to the columns. And 4 is bracing members that are central to the vertical stability of the primary structural frame under gravity loading shall be considered part of the primary structural frame, whether or not the bracing member carries gravity loads. So we're going to have some items that are specifically listed that connect to the columns, and others, as long as they provide some kind of stability to the structure, they've got to be protected. And that's the primary structural frame. Now, the following structural members are considered secondary and not part of the primary structural frame. And this is going to include structural members not having direct connection to the column, members of the floor construction and roof construction not having direct connection to the column, and bracing members other than those that are part of the primary structural frame. Again, staying in Chapter 6 of the IBC, the exterior non-bearing wall and partitions are regulated by Table 602. So 601, 602, 603. The Table 602 determines what fire rating, if any, is required based on proximity to the property line. Always read the footnotes in this table, since the footnotes modify certain requirements. Once the building is properly classified into one of the 5 types of construction in Table 601, and the occupancy is also known, the allowable building area can be determined. So we have a step-by-step approach to getting to building area. Again, tab and highlight Section 602, Construction Classifications. It's my hope that this review has been good for you, and we ask you to please like, subscribe, and support to this channel. Support this work. We offer these videos free for everyone to learn. I also can do in-person training, which I prefer, but it just depends on logistics. So get in touch with me by my email. It's posted on this page, and I'll be glad to get back to you. And if we can work out or help you with anything, we will. And we wish you the very best in your professional career. Thank you.